Hello YouTube, it's Carrie here, and I am your Saturday vlogger for ProofWLSWorks. Today's topic is, I recently came to the realization of how insanely important this is. I'm 8.5 years out from my surgery. You think any complication that I haven't had already I wouldn't be having, but because I've recently lost so much weight, this happened to me because one of the complications that can occur from a Roux-en-Y surgery is something called a Peterson's hernia. And the more weight you lose, the more things can move around, and under that Y in structure of the surgery, there can be a little space, and as you lose weight, that can get bigger, and because you have less visceral fat holding everything in place, that's what happened to me. Part of my intestines moved into that space, and it was got to the point where it was starting to cut off the circulation to my intestines. It's very dangerous. I had to have emergency surgery on the 16th of last month. I did not have really an emergency plan in place, and that was a problem. Previously, I'd had so many complications from my surgery before, and I did quite a bit of traveling after that, and I did have emergency procedures in place for that travel. I made sure I had the type of insurance where you could get an air evacuation to a North American facility, because I was doing a lot of my work in the tropics in Central America. And that was important. In fact, the first year that I did that, I was doing a program through Operation Wallacea, and originally I wanted to go out to Indonesia because that was one of the places they were doing the project, but because it was so far afield and I wouldn't have been able to have that type of evacuation, I couldn't go there. So I changed my plan and went to a place where I actually would be able to do that. Last year, I moved from Toronto to Niagara Falls. Canadian healthcare system is wonderful, but when you move to a new place, it can be difficult to find a doctor, and I've been trying to get a family doctor for quite a while. That being said, there's not a lot of people maybe further afield that are physicians that are familiar with the type of surgery that we have, and part of finding that new doctor and developing that patient-doctor relationship is also educating your doctor on what the possible complications and side effects and issues can be with your particular surgery, as well as, of course, the labs that are so important for us to do on a regular basis to make sure that we're staying on top of our nutrition. So when I moved, I had a real trouble finding a doctor, and currently I am waitlisted for October. I found some difficulty getting some support from my local emergency room to have them write a letter just of patient advocacy, just of a patient statement. They wouldn't do it. I did get one from my surgeon in Toronto. So what happened to me was that I went to the local emergency room. That emergency room, I thought I had an ulcer. I'd forgotten about the possibility of internal hernia, and the pain had been going on for a while, but it had been getting progressively worse. And when I finally went to the hospital, all they did was an x-ray. They did not do a CT. You should know that if you have a situation like that where you're having abdominal pain or you're having that type of situation and you are a weight loss surgery patient, sometimes it can be important to truly insist on a CT, because an x-ray doesn't catch everything that a CT does. And they sent me home after doing an x-ray and saying that I was fine. They sent me home with a referral to their surgeon, who comes in a couple times a week, who's not familiar with bariatrics. And they sent me home with some Nexium, because I thought I had an ulcer, and painkillers. And the problem with taking those painkillers is that sometimes they can mask the problem. And so I started taking the painkillers. I had some travel coming up for my parents' anniversary, and I was holding out the hope that that stuff would start working and my issue would go away. but instead the opposite of that happened, and it actually started getting progressively worse. I knew at that point, when I did move out, I didn't have, a doctor set up right away, and I knew that was going to take time, but I did join the local bariatric support group, and that was pivotal in establishing some relationships in order for me to get help when I was in an emergency situation. I don't really have a lot of friends, didn't really know a lot of people in my new city, and I think it's pretty universal among weight loss surgery patients that we tend to have an instant rapport with other weight loss surgery patients because we've gone through so many common experiences. And the relationships that I developed in that support community really, really were pivotal. I knew that if I went back to the local emergency room, I would have the same experience. And so I knew that if it got worse, I would absolutely have to go to the closest bariatric center, which was an hour away in Hamilton. I live in Niagara Falls. When things got so bad, finally one night, I called a friend, and really I was like desperate. I said, I need somebody to drive me to Hamilton immediately. The pain was so bad. I think the closest way to describe it would be if you could imagine being squeezed to death by a python, or like a giant python squeezing you to death, and that's what it felt like. And truly, that sort of is what was happening inside, because that hernia was cutting off the circulation to my intestines, and that eventually would have caused the lack of blood circulation there would have started necrosis, which eventually would have led to sepsis. One of the first people that I followed on YouTube was Massage Goddess back in 2009 when I was coming up. She had the most complete channel and really the most true-to-life experiences, and she documented everything. And I remember hearing about that. So what happened was my friend, my girlfriend Linda, drove me. She drove all the way out to Niagara Falls and then drove me out to the hospital in Hamilton. Stayed up with me all night. She truly is an angel. And as soon as the bariatric team came in the morning, very first thing, they saw me immediately sent me into CT, and within half an hour they had to analyze the data, and they were telling me what happened and what's going on. And they came in the room and they said, you have an internal hernia. And the minute I heard those words, I knew I was going to be having surgery, because I remembered Amelia's story. And so they said, you're having surgery today. And that was it. And within a couple of hours, I was in the emergency room, the surgical suite, having surgery. It is extremely important to have a plan in place. I don't have a medical ID bracelet. I'm going to be going to, I'm actually out in California right now. I've been having a really, really slow recovery, and so I decided to come out and stay with my parents out here. And I have travel insurance and all that stuff, so I know that I can go to the emergency room if there's a problem. I never travel without it. Don't travel without an emergency plan in place. Always know where you can get help. It is vitally important for us as weight loss surgery patients. So I do have my plan now. I had moved. There were issues because of it. I am still searching for a new doctor. And in the meantime, I was told by the bariatric clinic in Hamilton that I should be getting follow-up from my revision surgeon in Toronto, who I last saw 5 years ago. When I had some post-operative complications with pain, because I was healing so slow, I went back to the emergency room in Niagara Falls and had a hellacious experience that I won't even get into. And I reached out to Scotty, if you know Scotty NY. He had the same surgeon as me. I had him send all the contact information for Dr. Hagen's office, and immediately got in touch with them and was given an emergency appointment with them ASAP. And so that's how I got my follow-up for my surgery. And it's so important to have these plans in place, guys, and to really think about what you're going to do if you do have that rare complication, because you never know who it's you know, I could be so lucky to win the lottery, right? 1% complication rate. Oh, lucky me. You know, and today I'll be going to the first meeting of the NorCal chapter for the WLSFA here in Sacramento, and they're going to be giving out medical ID bracelets. You know what? Yeah, I'm realizing more and more how important this can be. If I had an issue and let's say I had to run over to my neighbor's place and passed out from pain, all she would know to do is call 911. They wouldn't know anything about my surgery. These emergency plans are important, guys. When you're traveling, when you move to a new place, when you change doctors, all of that stuff, no matter how far out from surgery you are. You know, it's not just for newly post-ops. This could be 10 years out from surgery. You can have a complication. Make an emergency plan. This is vitally important. We did this for health. We want to have as long a life as possible, and this emergency plan is part of that. So stay safe. Lots of love to you all, and tons of love to my bariatric community worldwide, online, locally, everywhere. You know, we're here to support each other, and this stuff is important.